Hello again, friends. It's been a while since I've done Vanguard related content, largely because I find Standard to be incredibly boring. The rule changes that they've made to take away 16 critical triggers have put a foul taste in my mouth. Them changing Dayusha away from a critical bonus unit to a re-standard, while it makes them a better card, just is not the Dayusha that I like. So it hasn't really scratched the itch for me to want to get back into it. I did try out Dear Days 1 to see if I liked it, and to be honest, I liked playing Bavs, I liked playing Barrow Magnus, but for the most part, nothing really felt that fun to play. And I really didn't like being limited to just 5 clans. I would have rather had all of the clans that we used to have. So I long for the old days. And to be fair, I do play Vanguard EX still, and I will still occasionally bust out the 3DS Vanguard games, because I enjoy older formats. So when they announced that there would be a vintage format for Dear Days 2, I was pretty hyped up. But after thinking about it for a while, I realized that this very well could be completely different to the set 1 to 5 format that we remember. Obviously, I'm not talking about the English format where we got sets 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. Rather, I'm talking about the set 1 through 5 Japanese format. And I think it could be very different even than that, based off of a variety of factors. So the first factor that came into my head is going to be card availability. Assuming that we have all of the same cards that would be available at the time of this format, that should be 54 promotional cards, the 4 or 5 major trial decks, I don't remember if Shadow Paladin had a trial deck, and the sets that they listed. Going by the image that we have, we can see that this is Randall right here, in case you couldn't tell which one this was. All of these are the set 1 Royal Paladin cards, including Randall. Nothing is shown on this image other than set 1 cards, so this doesn't let us know if we're getting trial decks, this doesn't let us know if we're getting promotional cards. I think that it's relevant to bring up that many promotional cards are going to have a major impact if they are not there or if they are there. So I'm hoping that we do get the promo cards, or at least most of them. Also not listed here would be the starter deck cards that had Crested Dragon and Star Drive Dragon. I would like that for obvious reasons. But I do think it's important to bring up that if we are missing some promos, there are some that would be relevant. So Cup Bowler was good for the $10 hyper budget rush deck. You had cards like Dragonic Waterfall, which is honestly just a massive attacker, and I think that actually goes pretty well with Dragonic Volblade, which was up here. Volblade gets 5k every time you drive check a grade 3, so you could run a Goku Volblade Waterfall deck and have all of the grade 3s in the world, make Morikawa super proud. Decks like that would be fun to play, and missing out on those cards would be huge. For Pale Moon, Purple Trapezist is a promo, and that is a card that is, the last time I checked, even in 2021, it was still a staple. I don't know if it is now or not, but that's absolutely integral for Pale Moon to even function as a deck. And if that's missing, that's going to have a huge impact. And then there's just other generically powerful cards. Cursed Lancer, when it hits on flip. Kung Fu Kid Bolta is a basically free 11k attacker for Nova Grapplers. Pretty useful. Especially since, they're using stand triggers a lot in this format. Flare Whip Dragon, I believe that's the one that when you drive check a Flame Dragon, it gets plus 3k. So that's a 16k attacking Vanguard. So with a regular trigger boost, that's 21k. With a 7k boost, that's hitting 23k over the Crossrides. And Crossrides are, of course, going to dominate this format. So there's a lot of cards that are very relevant in the promo section, and if the promos are missing or even partially missing, that could create some type of issue. Mega Colony really needs Mega Colony Battler B. That's essential. Mayaraga isn't as good, but I played the crap out of that card for my mixed decks. And Conjurer of Mithril is pretty good for Galahad as well. So there's a lot of good cards here. Kungal and Dread Charge Dragon are the first Narukami and Gold Paladin promos. So we may or may not get No Life King Death Anchor, but if they were going to put a stop on where the promos end for this format, it would probably be either at or including No Life King Death Anchor. So that covers the promo card availability. But more pertinently, I think that the biggest change that we're going to see are rule changes. There are a lot of things that are different about the game of Cardfight Vanguard than how they were when sets 1 through 5 originally came out. And this isn't even just counting mixed stuff. Like, this is counting foundational rule changes. So G Assist now exists. And G Assist no longer requires you to get cards out of your G zone to perform the G Assist, and it's a universal mechanic. Will G exist in this format? I do not know. Guard Restrict. So let's talk about... I don't need this up anymore. Let's talk about Still Vampire. Still Vampire used to have a game-ending devastating effect, because he would take one of your opponent's rear guards, force them to ride it as their Vanguard. If they happened to have their grade 0-4 runner out, then they would be unable to guard with grade 1 or higher units. They changed Cardfight Vanguard so that you can guard with any grade at any time. Will Still Vampire still have any relevancy whatsoever, or is it just going to be even worse than it already was? Because, I mean, I'm not going to pretend like Still Vampire was a good card, but it's losing its entire gimmick at that point. And if it is the case that you can just guard with grade 2s or grade 3s and pitch them all out of your hand whenever you want to, that might also increase the strength of certain Nubatama cards, like Hagakure, which, when you have less cards than your opponent when it enters the Guardian Circle, then you can counterblast and discard your opponent's hand. So there's quite a few things that change pretty rapidly, depending on how the rule changes are. And I think the most relevant one is going to be critical triggers. If you can only run 8 critical triggers in this format, that wildly changes how everything works. There are other minor things, like you don't choose, or like if you win the dice roll now, you choose whether you go first or second instead of it being forced upon you. So I do think that that's not super relevant, but if you're playing a grade 1 rush deck, you do want to go second, so that basically guarantees, if you're playing a grade 1 rush deck, that you're going to have that advantage. Otherwise, that's just... those are still a lot of things that could be very different about how the game is played. Moving over to Bandon Restricted cards. Now, there were no Bandon or Restricted cards when... oh wait, there was one more rule change I forgot to mention. So, cards like Dauntless Drive Dragon give you an effect that says... this is effectively a once per turn effect. And it says, at the end of the battle that this unit attacked, if this unit has not become stand during that turn, you may pay the cost if you do stand this unit. So, what used to happen is you would have Dauntless Drive Dragon with Dragonic Overlord the end, and then you would have the whole wombo combo of, am I going to stand or am I going to stand? Now, it used to be the case that if you waited to use Dauntless Drive Dragon after you restood with Dragonic Overlord the end because they let the first attack hit, that you could no longer use the restand effect of Dauntless Drive Dragon because it's a once per turn. But they changed how once per turns work, so now they're always optional. So now, Dauntless Drive Dragon, you no longer have to have the effect proc, and you can wait until after Dragonic Overlord at the end causes you to restand, and then use Dauntless Drive's restand. So that foundationally changes how good this combo is, because I know everyone played it. I'm going to be honest with you, it was garbage when it was played. Every other Kagero Vanguard, for the most part, was better to ride over it. So this actually makes this combo very, very good. And that kind of rule change in set 11 would change so much about how the game is played, especially when you factor in other cards like Benedict or Tidal Assault. Now, instead of being forced to stand him and forcing him to lose power, you could actually attack with him, have another effect that stands him, attack with him, and then he stands himself and then he attacks again. And this will give him that extra 5,000 power for the course of those other for the course of that first attack. So when you're talking about like once per turn effects, that actually has a huge impact. Maybe not so much in the set 1 to 5 area, but in the sets 10 to 15, it's huge. So I think that covers the rule changes that I was thinking of. For Bandon Restricted cards, we did have a banned list right here. This started in 2013, so this was after set 5 was launched, obviously by quite a bit. I don't know if they're going to ban Barkle. I don't know if Barkle's just going to be allowed to steamroll everything. because Barkle was really, 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 really strong. Wingle Brave, honestly, in an MLB deck, I don't even know if I would play Wingle Brave over Barkle. That's how good Barkle is. So we're going to have to wait and see, because obviously these three decks are going to completely dominate the format. And if that's the case, we don't know how they're going to handle their power level, because clearly these three decks are wildly stronger than everything else that's around them. And then, of course, the final consideration would be mixed clans. When it comes to deck mixing in Vanguard, they effectively banned it at around the second or third set of Vanguard G in English, and I believe they did it in the Legion format for Japan. So that meant that up until basically after Glendios, so after Season 3, was when mixed decks got banned. I don't know if this vintage format is going to allow you to mix decks or not. If they do not allow you to mix decks, then that's going to wildly dampen the amount of fun that I'm going to have for sure. But also, it's going to make some cards unplayable. Because if we go back to the list of cards, we can see in set 1, we have a particular clan called Nubatama. Nubatama does not get support until set 13. And they did this pretty regularly early on in Vanguard. I'm trying to think if there's any clan other than Nubatama that doesn't have support, that didn't get it by set 5. I'll think about that. But in set 2, they started to support Bermuda Triangle and Tachikaze and Great Nature. So Great Nature doesn't have a deck yet. Set 3, they brought in Dimension Police. Actually, there was Dimension Police in set 1 too, but this is where they released, Super Dimensional Robo Dayusha. But there weren't enough Dimension Police cards to make a deck until set 4, when Dimension Police finally got support, and then Mega Colony finally got support so that they could play too. And it wasn't until set 5 when Murakumo had enough cards for a deck and when Neonectar had enough cards for a deck. But then Great Nature still technically exists, but you can't play with their cards. So if they don't let you mix decks, then you have the problem where you have cards that exist that can't be played, which seems very strange to me. If they do let you mix decks, that would be fun, but we'll just have to wait and see. Also, I don't know what they're going to do specifically with Majesty Lord Blaster, because the way that it used to be was when they finally did ban mixed decks, they made it so that you could have up to 10 Shadow Paladins in a Royal Paladin deck. Then they changed that to just making Blaster Dark effectively a Royal Paladin. They may have to make Blaster Dark dual clan the way that they did with Blaster Blade Spirit and Blaster Dark Spirit. I don't know exactly what they're going to do with this, but these are factors that could reshape how this format plays out wildly. Now, I could get into certain other things. I do think that I want to talk later about what decks I think are going to be strong and what decks I think are going to be fun to play. One of those decks I already mentioned would be like the Goku Dragonic Vol Blade Dragonic Waterfall deck, assuming that they have those promos. But because I have these questions, I don't know if I can even effectively give any information as to what decks are going to be good or not, at least in the secondary meta, outside of Dragonic Overlord The End, Majesty Lord Blaster, and Tsukuyomi. Because we don't know what the rules are going to be for these decks and how that's going to impact the game. If they do just make the game as it was, which I kind of doubt, that could be fun, but they would also have to integrate that into an engine that already exists, that's already using the current standard rules. And I know that they're going to have to tweak that anyway in order to make it work, but I'm concerned, but I'm also excited, but I also don't know what's happening as far as how this is going to work, because if the rules do stay updated with Modern Vanguard, that changes how so many of these old interactions work. So that was basically what I wanted to discuss today, just this changing of how the game is going to function, potentially, and what could happen with this vintage format. Obviously, I could talk about more speculative stuff, like whether or not I think that they're planning on doing DLCs for this. I think that they probably will, assuming vintage format is popular enough in the game. I would like to see that. I would love to have up to set 15. I think that having all of Limit Break and the Break Ride era would be so fun. Early G would be even better, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. That's pretty much all I had for this video. Thank you.